roundtable discussion. One of the things that came out of last year's feedback was wanting to have some kind of a roundtable discussion for the PSAPs, to discuss any issues that may be happening, and so I will turn it over to Emily to help out with this roundtable discussion.
Hello everyone. Those of you that have suffered through my roundtables at APCO, so sorry for your loss today. So slated was issues in the PSAP is what we're going to custom discuss, so to speak, today. Let's start with the biggest one, staffing issues. Everybody has staffing issues, right? How do we fix staffing issues? Anybody have any inclination?
I figured it out.
Did you?
Yeah,
I'm so
you leave
proud
the
of you.
piece out.
That,
You go do
it's
something
not
else.
even helping.
Anymore.
Please don't listen to him. Anybody, incentives. How do you boost morale to keep your people? Roundtables are a group discussion. Yes.
I'm Jessica Lynch. I just joined Hutchinson when I came from Oregon. So a couple of the things that we had done over there to help like facilitate a hiring list or make it a little bit easier when we're seeing turnover that we're not expecting is we have what we call the reserve program. So in Oregon, the state of Oregon issues certifications. So you can have a basic, an intermediate, and an advanced. And your telecommunicator attends a police academy specific for telecommunications.
Hold that back. I'm going to bring the thing. Hi, I'm just here for the first
So, for those of you that didn't hear, I came from Oregon. I'm new to Kansas, in Hutchinson. But one of the things that happened in Oregon, so kind of to give you the structures, our telecommunicators were certified through the state. We have what's called DPSST, Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, and they oversee all of the public safety certifications. So specifically for telecommunicators, you could have an advanced and or a basic and intermediate or an advanced certificate. So there's a point to this, like it all kind of ties in. So anyway, our telecommunicators attend the police academy, and it's specific for telecommunications, so their time is different and their training is a little bit different. But what we did with our facilities, we had what was called a reserve program. And so what we did is we recruited in, we brought people who were interested in 911, and what we would do is we would train them. They were not, it was all on their own. They were not paid for their training time. It was a volunteer situation, but what happened is once they were trained, or to a certain point, we would send them to the police academy and we would cover that expense for them. And then they would come back and there's a manual that they would have to finish for the state to receive that basic certification. So they were putting that time in, we were getting people trained, and their outcome of that is they would leave a basic certification so they could lateral to another agency if they needed to do that. But we utilized them for, we got a chance to see hiring lists. Are these people that we want, you know, to have at our agency, and it gave us a chance to interact with them. And then they brought us some of our best information as we're kind of continuing to develop our new training and whatnot, but they would also cover vacation leave, sick leave, things like that. So far, it's always offered to full-time staff first for overtime, but we could utilize them in a pinch. So we would initially just have them as a call taker. It's not ideal, but you have somebody who could come in as a call taker. And they would be paid for shifts they were worked. So they had to be trained to a certain point, and then you would pay them for covering shifts. And then you get them into the dispatching part of it. So it just was something that was helpful for us. Sometimes you have a lot of reserves, sometimes you don't have very many. But at least it gave you a pool to choose from should you have an unexpected, somebody who ends up leaving your agency unexpectedly.
Wasn't that interesting? All of you are not awake. I see you. Listen, I move around a lot. Sorry. Hi, Kim. How's everybody doing today?
So along the hiring front, we all struggle. I'm Roxy, by the way, from Lyon County, if nobody knows who I am. Nobody's really pushed our job postings in previous administrations, and our city police and somewhat to a degree our county sheriff created some videos, some good promotional videos that kind of show why you want to be a cop and why you want to be a deputy. So I thought, why not show why our job is important? So we created a video that ties into the I Am 911 movement, basically showing how we're a part of every call. It's on our Facebook page. I'm super proud of it, but this is our first posting that we've had since we created that video. And generally I get about 4 to 5 viable applicants per job posting. This last posting I got 38, so I don't know if that's the smoking gun, but it's what we've done differently. We partnered with the sheriff and the police department. They've really been pushing it out on their social media. They have a broader scope than we do. So it's been really good because they've actually pushed it for us. So a lot of people have seen it. So maybe that's helpful. I don't know. It is. Yeah, it is.
I like it. Anybody else gets recruiting videos? Cheer. Kidding. I think that's an awesome idea, recruiting video. Let's get everybody singing, dancing, talking about how stressful and terrible our lives are after we become those fighters. Anybody else?
I try to involve the community. I mean, small rural areas, our hiring pool is not great, and they're looking for the 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. So I try to target high school kids who are getting ready to graduate, and maybe don't know if they want to go to college, or maybe they're going to go to Colby Community College, which is only 16 miles away, and they might need to work the night shift. I went to Colby College my first year of college, so I have some ties with the criminal justice department, and he's actually invited me to come speak at his classes. So I try to target up-and-coming, the younger ones, because the older ones in our community are pretty set in their 8 to 5s. So,
Get them before they get too smart.
exactly.
See you.
I wanted to just talk not so much about recruiting, but retention. My name is Laura Forshy, but one of the things that I've been paying a lot of attention to that I think is worth looking at, in my opinion, is why do we have to recruit so much? And part of our issue is retention. And as I look around at these dispatcher Facebook groups and these posts, and even some posts within our own state and our professional organizations, we're a really toxic group. And we treat our personnel really nasty. We are nasty to our new people. We're just kind of nasty. Even at this level, I've been in some meetings with fellow directors throughout the state that have been very toxic and nasty and contentious, and it's a lot of ego-driven. And I have my own fingers to point at myself in that. So I'm not saying that I'm sitting here perfect by any means, but I think that that is something that we are going to have to start looking at within our culture in dispatch of why do we treat each other so poorly? Why do we treat our new folks so poorly? Why would people want to stay in a job that we've already talked about is not recognized for what it's supposed to be, is not paid as highly as what it's supposed to be? You sit all day listening to the worst of the worst, and then you look to your coworker and they're just sniping at you and spitting venom at you, and your administration's not recognizing things that are happening or seeing the value in what you do, and so why would somebody want to come work for us? So in my opinion, we can make recruitment videos all day singing our praises, and we are good at recognizing about what's great about the profession, but when it gets down to the day-to-day at the console, what are we doing to make sure that our folks are treating each other well, that we are treating each other well, and to identify what's toxic in our culture and fixing it. So that's the challenge that we put out in our team, to start identifying those toxic behaviors and changing them. It's a challenge I would put out to you guys as other directors to start identifying that. And not only that, but when you see that start happening in social media and other things, be the voice that says, you know what, this isn't right. Rather than being the voice that says, yeah, I like to be the queen bee at the console and this and that. It's not cool to be a bitch. I mean, it's just not. So.
So that brings us to a different topic, office drama. How many of you suffer from this affliction in your centuries? We do. She's been there and done that. How do you handle that? How do you handle the gossip? How do you handle the rumors? How do you handle the nastiness between your dispatchers? Who handles that? Me, as a supervisor, it is my job to keep my people in line, right? That's what we're paid for. We have to be the main ones that say, no, you're going to timeout, that's not nice. Right? It's a terrible job if somebody's gonna do it. It's like wrangling toddlers at Walmart. You know? How do you stop it though? Are you in,
I think you have to be unafraid to hold them accountable. I think we've gone a lot of years, I'm a new director, I've only been there 14 months. We've gone a lot of administrations where people were too afraid to hold people accountable. The snagging was the culture because God forbid we lost someone. I'm 5 people down, 3 of those are my doing, and you've got to hold people accountable. And in the end, they may not like it at first, but in the end, it creates a culture of kindness. We're pushing, we've changed our core values. We got all input from our people. What do you hold most important? And I want you to hold your fellow coworkers accountable for that. But we have to be afraid of, or not afraid as directors, to call those people to the carpet and dismiss them if needed. I mean, staffing is always going to be a problem, always going to be an issue. Holding on to those negative, cancerous people just to fill a seat is not okay. And we have to start changing that narrative. We're always going to need people, but those people create such a toxic work life that it's just not necessary. So that's my answer.
you have to be proactive. As a leadership.
I'll speak louder. Well, I think there's kind of this misnomer in leadership that there's this cute idea that we're going to have open door policies. And we take those open door policies as, hey, you can come into my office and you can complain about your coworkers and you can complain about whatever else is going on, and that there's not going to be any accountability to that, that it somehow abdicates the employee and dumps it on my plate. And one of the things our organization has done to shift that culture, and I think Laura hit it very much on the head, was to push it back onto the employee. Have you talked to that person? Or, that sounds like a rumor. Did you hear them say that? Well, no, then get out. We're not interested in rumors. We're interested in fact. We're interested in, did you talk to that person about that problem? As opposed to, hey, that's awful, that sounds really bad, I'm gonna go hammer on that person. You know, did you talk to your direct supervisor about that? What answer did they give you? Those kind of things. I think it's a good thing from an accountability standpoint to have open door policies, but I think we misuse it. I think we allow, as leadership, we allow the toxicity to kind of fester, and people can circumvent actually having to deal with problems like adults. And that, since we've done that, they know if they come to my office, first question out of my mouth is, did you talk to that person? What did they say? Did you talk to your supervisor? What did they say? I will tell you, I have chased my tail, and I was guilty of going, oh, that's awful, I'm going to come down on those rumors, I'm going to come down on that person for that awful behavior. Well, it's not black and white. There's 2 sides to every story. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and I'm getting one side of that story, and there's elaborations and exaggerations and omissions and all that kind of stuff. Part of that's on us, and I think it is the misuse of that open door policy or that open door idea. We really need to hold staff accountable to having actual human interaction with their peers and having professional relationships. You know, the other thing that we've implemented is a very, very, very hard honesty policy. If you are dishonest in our center, you're done. I can't handle any sort of dishonesty. That's painful. That's really painful. That's hard to implement. But we refuse to have dishonest people. You're going to lie about your coworkers. You're going to lie about how you handle the call. You're going to lie about, well, I did the transfer It's not, no, I've got this thing to blame over here. It's, no, I screwed up. Help me learn from it. Okay, I can work with that. So between those two things, that has shifted our culture tremendously.
Very nice. Oh, you guys are so quiet. I don't like that we're so
So one thing that I've noticed a lot is Roxy had her county hosted an awesome class on stress within dispatchers. And the one thing that I've noticed within my own dispatchers is that they are always so much more catty after a bad call. And I think in some ways, we all want to say that dispatchers can be so nasty to each other, they can just, be very difficult to work with, but I think in a lot of times, we may be neglecting some of the underlying reasons behind that. There's still a lot of counties that don't offer any, either critical stress debrief, or there's no support for their mental health. And so instead of being, reinforced and taught positive coping skills and, given time off if need be after a bad call, whatever the policy is, a lot of places don't have that. And so instead of being able to get the support they need, it comes out as being angry, it comes out as whatever. And it's not just at work. We all know that within dispatch, first responding, just look at the divorce rates at home. If it's doing that at home, what makes us think it's going to be any different when they come to work? If it's bad enough, if what they're going through from their, vicarious trauma is bad enough that it's causing a divorce in their family, why do we think they're going to come to work and get along great with their coworkers? Everybody reacts to stress differently, and I think that that's one of the things that we kind of forget about sometimes when we just sit there and say, well, this is just a toxic person. Okay, well, were they always toxic? Did we hire them and they were toxic? Or were they a great dispatcher up until they took a death of a child call and now they're toxic? So I think that's just something, I don't want to use it as an excuse for negative dispatchers, because there's definitely those around too. But if there's a change over time in a dispatcher, maybe we need to look at the underlying issues behind that before we automatically look at, well, we just need to get rid of them.
You guys know your people the best, right? You work with them day in, day out. So if you see a change, what do you gotta do? You gotta talk to your people, right? Hey, how you doing? You're having a bad call. Are you okay? What do you gotta do? You know when they're having a bad call, right? Gets pages, you're in the room, you're not in the room, you hear about it. You gotta be proactive. I say it a lot, you guys heard me say it a lot, I know. You gotta talk to your people. Open door policies. You hear bickering, walk in, be like, hey, how's it going? Come.
Jerry with Independence. Coming from the law enforcement side, there is a lot of opportunity to get leadership training in Kansas without having to travel far. And I've tried to grow my knowledge in dispatch, but the only training that I can find is pretty lofty, week, 2 week long, 6 month long correspondence type training. So I think I would encourage everyone to seek out leadership training opportunities, or if we could develop leadership training opportunities like KU develops or KLETC develops that would apply to dispatch centers. Because I know for me that'd be helpful, and I think that might help a lot of morale issues.
I agree. We have a lot of training just for our line dispatchers. It's not a lot available for leadership. That's not lengthy. Training is important. I love training. It's my family. Anybody else? Let's talk about training issues. Oh, wait! It's the quiet table, ladies and gentlemen.
Center, and Liz is a co-supervisor with me. We have noted that on our shifts, we keep our thumbs on things. And when they start to shift with each other, we put the thumb on it right away. But then all of a sudden, we hear that the other shifts are having issues. And it always is, we were just talking about schedule on the way up here, it's always the other shift. But one of the things that we have been trying to do is making them not just personally accountable, but ourselves personally accountable for it getting that to that issue. Not 6 weeks down the road when everybody has forgot what happened, but right now, when it comes up, you say, wait a minute. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear what you're making. You could be making less. I don't want to hear about this issue. It could be worse with our staff. And not just holding ourselves accountable, or not holding them accountable, but holding ourselves accountable for their actions, because you are their team leader. You are their back, and you know when the shit hits the fan, communications is going to be responsible for it. And whoever was the supervisor on shift is the one who's going to be take the ultimate beating. So make sure that we are held responsible. I agree that the leadership stuff has to start. It has to start. We can't hold ourselves accountable. We can't hold anybody if we don't know what we're doing. A lot of people who have walked into these shoes, walked into our jobs, are great dispatchers. They're wonderful dispatchers. They are not good leaders, and in some cases, they're not good people. Everybody has to hold themselves accountable.
I like it. Good listening. But you gotta be there for your people, right? Mine 100% know that I will stand behind them, stand beside them, I got their back. Even when they're wrong. As long as they can justify their actions to me, I'll be like, okay. How are we gonna learn from them? What can we do different next time? You know, it's not always a negative thing, just because they mess up. They can't always see you because they're in trouble, right? They gotta know you're there for them when they do something every day. Yeah, it was a good ball call. Good job. Nailed it. Because if they only see you for negative reasons, morale's gonna go down, right? And when morale goes down, everything goes to hell in a handbasket real fast. Pardon the expression. Back to the training topic. Tell me I'm fine. Am I going to be perfect? Brady, she's great. How you doing?
Hi, I'm Lori with Reno County, and we have resolved the training issue. About a year ago, we were given a really good opportunity to change the way that we trained, and we geared it toward the employee instead of towards us. And so that might not be favorable for a lot of organizations because some are way bigger than us. But I get an opportunity to set the interview and learn about the employee and how they learn. And then we gear and we set up CTOs, and I'm really nervous, I'm sorry,
No, you're fine.
to focus on the employee and to change our style for them so that they don't feel defeated when they've done a wrong call wrong or they misclassified something. We guide them through the process. We've changed our classroom to be more on the job, blended it all. So when they leave the classroom, they leave with skill to the console. So when we're scoring as CTOs, we're not always starting at 1. They are getting like 2s and 3s right away because now they have skill that we've given them based on what we do. We have a different approach when we talk to them. We don't allow rolling of the eyes in the room. People know that if that is noticed, it is an unacceptable behavior and it gets dealt with. And it's a person-to-person conversation, it's not an email. We put that conflict back into the person that's doing it, into their shoes. If you were in training, what would you feel like if you received this? We're still transitioning. Everybody's trying to get on board to the new style of doing things. But it's been noticed with those that have been around and didn't get to go through it, because now they're being conflict is, well, why wasn't I treated that way, or why wasn't this done for me? But I think they're liking it, and they're adjusting to it. But we had to change the approach as CTOs and as supervisors. It started with us when we showed them what we were going to be like, because they mirror us anyway. And when we got on board with it all, I've been seeing our CTOs and our supervisors really embrace a trainee who would be in tears and just really talk to them one-on-one and just pull them into the conversation, what's going on with them, whether it be personal or work-related. But that's how we've done it, and I'm hopeful it's just going to continue to grow from there.
How many of you use personality surveys? The Kirsten temperament is amazing. If you don't use it, you don't know how to get it, email me, I'll send it to you. Because it tells you exactly how they learn. Whether it's visual, whether they do it best by hearing, hands-on. It makes a huge difference as a training officer to adjust your style of teaching, how they learn. Everybody learns differently. So if you're having issues with people, what? Oh, okay, it's really complicated. E, that's an Edward, PAPA at DKCOKS.org. I have a plethora of training information I am very happy to share. Some of you in this room have gotten a lot of it, 17 years worth of it. But personality profiles are amazing because it tells you a lot about a person. So much about your trainings coming in because you have to adjust to them. They have to learn their way. They're not going to understand what we do at all. Our job is complicated. It is hard. It is stressful. When we, 6-7 years ago when I started using it, my trainees stopped crying. And that's an amazing feat. For those of you that have trained and your trainees break down and cry in the middle of training or they go home and cry every night, that makes them not want to come back to work. They sit and think, I can't do this. There's no way I'm ever going to get it. Because they don't understand what you're trying to teach them. You can't just talk it at them. That doesn't work. It's terrible. Yes, Michelle.
I might be the oldest person here.
Yep.
I'm gonna say, you get hardened into the job, and after a while, you don't look in the mirror and see yourself as objectifying employees, treating them as an object rather than a human. And the day that you can look in the mirror and identify that they are humans with personalities, with families, with problems, and you treat them that way, you will see a huge difference. I also, in the past, I'm just like laying myself out here and being vulnerable, I have allowed toxic employees to stay because of the turnover and needing a seat filler. And you will find it goes back to the very early conversation of when you remove that toxic person from the center, although it creates a burden and hardship on your staff to backfill over time, the long-term effects will be beneficial. We can't keep seat fillers anymore. They have to be someone who's productive, positive, and understands the culture that you're trying to create within your center. The biggest takeaway, and we brought this with the new administration, is we're equals. We're not less than anyone in our department, no matter what position they are, whether they're the animal control, records, patrol, us. We are equals, and when you start thinking of yourself as equals and professionals, you will hold yourself straighter, your back is straighter, you walk taller, your opinions count when you're at a meeting, and we are family. Everybody in the department, everyone, from every position, from the very top to the very bottom. When you can do that, and you have to live it daily, you can, and it's a work in progress, I'm telling you, there are days, and I use this analogy all the time, we're so used to pedaling the same direction that when you take 100% culture change, every once in a while you're going to jump on that bike and you're going to pedal the way you always did, and you have to stop in your tracks and remember that we all are humans and we all have bad days and good days, And you're right, addressing it immediately and taking care of it and not letting it fester, your morale will change. And right now, there's not one thing, not one person in the 911 center, and I say this with 100% positive, that would not do anything for everyone that they work with. And that's a total change in our department, in our agency, and it's just, I would think at this point in my career, I wouldn't have been able to see that kind of change. But I would put everybody on the spot that's here from Reno County. I can't imagine one of our employees asking or needing something that there wouldn't be 10 people that raise their hand and try to meet that need immediately. So it doesn't happen quickly, and you're going to backpedal, but until you look every day at every single person sitting at every one of your consoles and think of them as a human and what they're bringing to the table, not an object, not a seat filler, not as a means to an end. The incentives, the retention kind of incentives that you're trying to come up with, I mean, we've thought them all through the past, like, can we give them a hiring bonus? Can we give them some incentives for staying? Can we, all of those and above? I don't think that money is always the issue. I don't think that shifts are the issue. It's the toxic environment that sometimes can happen, and it also is it's everything everyone has talked about here, and it's an everyday work in progress.
Very nice. Okay, so we talked about trainings a little bit. What about your current staff members? How many of them get to go out for training, get away, go learn something? It's hard sometimes. You don't have staffing, you don't have money. But it's important that they get to go out and go to training. It kind of makes them feel special, gives them a little, hey, look at me, I get to learn something and bring something back. And that makes them feel like a bigger part of the team. Even if it's just going to the case teachers training that Becky puts on, it's free. Send them for a day. Make them read a book. Verbal judo is a great one. Have them write something up. Teach the class. Just to your staff. Something simple. But everybody gets to learn something new. They get their training hours, and they get input somewhere else. I get to give it to Sherry. Hey, Sherry, look what I did. Look at me, I got a little star for the day. It makes them feel special, gives them that attaboy, which helps boost morale. Because you don't have morale in your dispatch centers. It goes so bad. Everybody's miserable. Nobody wants to come to work. Everybody calls in sick. They fight. They bicker. Yeah, it's terrible. Anybody? Listen, y'all got quiet. It's acceptable. Can't be the only one talking. Come back to this order.
Just one of the things that we have been talking about looking at implementing in the near future for our people is that community service aspect. So seeing how we can make our schedules happen where our people get to be out there in the community and get to do these things that really invest them into the community. It gives them a chance to be out of the center. It lets them be invested in the community, and then it also, it brings some attention to the center. So when you're looking at recruiting and you're looking at people, and that can be as simple as some of the things from where I came from. We were a high poverty area, and our school week was only 4 days, so our kids didn't go to school on Fridays. So what we ended up having was a lot of kids that were going 3 days without a meal instead of 2. So one of the local churches got together and worked with our food bank, and we could go once a week, Thursday mornings. It was called a backpack program. You go like at 7 o'clock in the morning, you fill these bags full of food, and then the teachers later in the day, the students that have been identified as having that need, would then slip that food into the backpack so that the kids have something for the weekend to be able to go back on. But just including your people in something as simple as that, if you can make that happen, they have that investment, and they get out of the center. And it just makes it a really nice place to be, and I think it gives them a lot more investment. But anything, meals, there's so much need in our communities. It could be as simple as going to one of the schools and reading to the kids. The teachers are looking for people once a week. Or at least where I'm from, I don't know yet, my kids are coming in a month. So I can't speak to the Hutchinson schools, but from where I was from, that was one of the things. And so as we're talking about recruiting and retention, I do think it's important to get out of the center and let them get out and really do something that lets them be a part of a bigger thing.
I would agree. This morning I had a conversation with Tim, am I right? Is that your name? From Crawford County. We were talking about training, and I'm very into training, sending my people to training. If at all possible, I send half of my staff. We're a very small staff, but I try to get half of them to one conference, and the other half goes to the other side of the conference each year to APCO. Not only does that get them out of the center, meet new people, but they bring ideas back. Just recently, we had evaluation reviews for our county that are due at the end of this month, and one of my employees had put on there that someday they want to come and teach a class. They were inspired by a class they were in at APCO, that the one day they want to become an instructor. That's one of their goals. Would they have ever thought of that? Potentially not, who knows? But just getting out of that environment of being in the hole, we call it, because we're in a basement, no windows, we literally have cameras only. You know, you're just like, oh, it's the same old day, I'm just going in, doing my shift, going home, living life. There's nothing outside of that as an opportunity sometimes. And I feel that giving my employees that opportunity to go to any training, whether it's a one day that we host sometimes, or going to several day, 2 or 3 day for APCO, or whatever it might be, that you never know what's going to come out of that for that employee, whether it's inspiration to find college training to get them further in their career potentially, or wanting to teach a class, being inspired by another instructor. I mean, it could be anything can come out of that, and I really encourage any agency that thinks, you know, is it really worth me spending the couple $100s for them to travel expense and whatnot? I guarantee you that morale boost it gives them is worth it. If you want to keep them wanting to strive to be better at their job, wanting to keep coming back, and improving as a person, as a team member, family member in your agency, it is very worth those few $100s instead of constant in and out people, just a revolving door. Nobody wants to stay because they don't get anything out of but sitting in that seat, taking their calls, and that's all that they're doing. So I encourage anybody that does not send people on a regular basis, even if it's one person that can go and get the information and bring it back to the group and have a group meeting, you don't know what that can inspire in the future.
And training is very important. I see you, Colin. Let me get on my soapbox for a second. Training is very important, and I know training standards is a touchy subject, and I'm not even going to go there right now. But it is up to us, as our agency leaders, to make sure that everybody gets proper training. Because everything changes, and you don't want to be that person that gets sued because you're not training your people properly.
I just want to add to what Becky said. It's so important, the training. When I first started in my career, I worked 6.5 years before I ever got to go to a training. I switched agencies, and the agency that I worked for wasn't real big into the training. And they didn't ever send me anywhere. I never got to meet any dispatchers from anywhere. So that first APCO I went to after I switched agencies was huge in my career, because I met all of the people that I talk to on pretty much a daily basis now. I have somebody to switch ideas with, talk about different things. This happened, how would you handle it? How can I handle it? What can I do to help this employee who's having this problem? And just having that network out there that I can reach out to, people that deal with the same things that I do. And from that experience, I want my people to get out there. I want them to meet dispatchers from other agencies, see how they do things. I always tell them I'm not so arrogant to think that my way is the best way. If you have ideas, come to me and talk to me about why, and we'll talk about implementing them. Because it's a team effort, and I don't always have the best answer. They might have a better answer than I do. But they have to get out there and get that training and meet people from other agencies who might do things a little differently, and we can incorporate it into our training programs and our ways of doing things to make things easier. It's huge.
That brings me to that one thing.
As the next time we throw out there, some way or
first started as a dispatcher was a really long time ago. But when I started, I had a deep and involved sense of exactly what Michelle was talking about, that I was a filler in a chair. And part of the reason for that is because the only attention that I or anyone else in our center ever got from the administration was when we screwed something up enough that someone complained. Not necessarily when we did our job wrong, but an officer had to complain, a fireman had to complain, something like that, and then it came down from above and you were wrong because somebody complained. The attempt that we made to correct that was QA. And it's very easy, especially as an administrator that has to mess with QA, to go, oh my gosh, this takes forever, it's a huge amount of time, it's a pain. But whether you're talking about going through people's EMD calls and following protocol, or just going back and listening to how your dispatchers are talking on the phone, the idea that you're paying attention enough to their job to hear what they're doing, to know if they're doing it right or wrong, and to relay that back to them when they're not in trouble, is a huge, huge motivator. It made an enormous difference at our center, and every time that we slacked off on it because we didn't have staff, or we didn't have time, or we didn't have whatever, you could see it in the morale, you could see it in the performance. So as much as going out to training is an important thing, a critical thing, and seeing the networking show you're a professional even when you don't feel like one, which is what conferences and training really provide, I believe. It's also important as administrators to make sure that you're paying attention to people's jobs all the time and not just when the lights flash or something goes on, because their perception of who they are and their perception of your value of them comes from how much attention you can pay, and comes from how much attention they think is being paid to the calls they're taking.
And just to add on to that a little bit, I think one of the things that we tend to fail to do is let those employees know how critical the job that they're doing is day to day to day. You know, I think once a year or so, typically at an APCO conference, somebody will talk about the horror stories of what happens when you slack off. But I think we need to reinforce that every day, how important they are to every one of the agencies that we serve. I mean, truly, they have lives in their hand every day, or potentially every day, that they sit down at the console. And I think we fail to keep that out in front of them. And
We expect people to save lives, we have to tell them that they're doing a good job once in a while, right? Because I want them to do CPR properly, not be angry. Why did you call me in the dead? I don't care.
We train every day, and reason we do it is because I noticed with all the good fire departments and EMS units and police departments around, they do a lot of training. One of the things we do is we'll look at the newspaper, see what that big story was, a big shooting here, a big shooting there, and you turn around and set it on the table and say, what if it happened at Craven High School? What if it happened at Hoisington High School? That's the big ones. And when we do a big fire call or something like that, I always like to turn around afterwards and just immediately say, okay, what did we do that was right? What did we do that was wrong? Check the card. Do you have everything that QAQI says you have to have? And then my people get angry with me because we'll get a call on a transfer from one hospital to another, and I'll turn around and say, okay, let's review that call. It's not that big a deal. It is to the person who's being transferred, or it is to the person who called in with a ridiculous request. It's important to them or they wouldn't call us. I always tell them, we don't get invited to the good parties. We get invited to the time when somebody thinks it's a catastrophe. And we have to be ready, and we have to wow them with our response. Give them something more than they really expected when they called in. And so we're training every day. And if you don't have somebody who does that, then you have to do it yourself. My people are starting to do it themselves.
Okay, so we're out of time for this one, but on my soapbox on the way up. I'm going to stress that networking is very important, to reach out to counties around you for ideas, training ideas, information. Training manuals are so important. It's bread and butter, people. If you don't have training manuals, you need to get them made and done, liability issues and such.
you for doing that for me, I appreciate it. My voice wouldn't even be able to take it, I knew. We are ready now for Lisa and Kian. And your presentations on here.